City, and we're on the porch. Actually, it's not Rutland City, nor is it on the porch, because it's in the middle of a beautiful February day. And I am here with, I'm sure many of you know, Mike Guay, proprietor of Enchanted Flora, here on the River Road. Thank you for coming.
Welcome to my home.
Thank you. This is our 4th episode, and it's spring. It feels like spring today, doesn't it?
It's an interlude.
Absolutely. So what I would like to start with is introducing you and your farm, Enchanted Flora, and the land that is here that you're working on.
I just want to specify that I lease the land I use. The farm belonged to the Billings family and has been in their family for 8 generations, pre-Revolutionary War times.
Okay. So you've been here with Enchanted Flora. Was last year your first? No, you have a history. Did you start at the farmer's market?
I did. Well, I actually started down here. I used to grow produce, organic produce, that I sold locally to some businesses, and we had a little farm stand here. We still have the farm stand, but my vision was one of my childhood memories where I grew up and we went to a local farmer who had a little shack by his driveway and a little coffee can you put money in, and I wanted it to have that old-timey feel. That didn't really work out.
How many years ago was that?
17?
Because now it seems to be working out for a lot of farmers.
It does. It is hard to be a pioneer in things, and it doesn't always work out. For me, it didn't financially and physically. I injured my back digging potatoes.
Oh dear.
You know, the old-fashioned way. I didn't use equipment like a lot of people do, and ended up, you know, I didn't have insurance at the time, and ended up in physical therapy, and those bills were racking up. And I had always
so
grown plants.
Potatoes have been around Vermont for a long time.
They have. They're an easy crop in our sort of climate.
How about, are you growing potatoes now, or no, you don't do that anymore?
No, I used to do some for personal use, and I am trying to avoid carbs a bit, because I love carbs, but they don't necessarily love me.
Yeah. So how did you come up with Enchanted Flora? You talked about, you know, not being a forward thinker.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well.
And you're organic, which is not what you get in the stores.
No, it's gotten better. And honestly, I personally can't always afford organic, and I have to work within a budget and the finances that are the reality of my life. I do what I can organically. I grow my plants organically. Occasionally I will have to use something, but I use very gentle things. I typically use insects to combat the insects that attack my plants.
Talk about your dirt.
Oh, soil. Soil.
I'm a believer. I am a believer. After last year, I will always be here to get your plants.
It's a compost-based product made by McEnroe Farms down in Millerton, New York, and that's where New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts meet up. And they have a huge organic farm and a wonderful business and restaurant down there, but they take all their farm waste and municipal waste from hospitals, grocery stores, all of that stuff that is considered unsaleable, and it all gets composted, and they bag it, which is wonderful. I used to get compost that wasn't bagged. It was such a waste because the bottom part would get sogging wet. Even though I put down tarps or plastic, there was no way to keep all the moisture out, and then it got full of algae and nasty and couldn't grow anything in it. So I was wasting like 10% of everything I was paying for.
We use soil savers, where you just put the stuff in the top and you just stir it around a couple times a season, and you get good compost on the bottom. It comes out the bottom. I think you can get that from the solid waste district.
What I do, well, the thing is, when you bring in off-farm inputs, you can bring in pathogens disease pathogens, seeds, and try and avoid that. I remember my friend and mentor Harold Billings when I was doing produce organically, and he wasn't organic. Was of a different generation, and he'd come down and he'd tell me, he says, "Oh, your plants look good." He said, "But God's plants look better." Couldn't argue. Weeds are a part of organic. You can only do so much to control nature.
Absolutely, absolutely. So tell us what you're growing. So where are you in your cycle now? Have you bought your seeds, or where are you at? Where are we at in February?
My seeds are all purchased. I'm still waiting for some on back order. Since COVID, everything, it's not just cars and microchips, it's everything. Everything is on back order or delayed. I just found out yesterday from a greenhouse supply company I do business with that because of the trucking strikes and the occupation of Ottawa and other places in Canada, nothing is coming to the border. And this is a critical time of year. And I placed an order, and all my pots and trays that I need to transplant things in, they're nowhere even near the United States right now, because of global manufacturing and a lot of the slowdowns. And I ran into this last year too, but was able to overcome it. We'll see what happens this year. All you can do is roll with it. You can't.
So you have nothing growing?
Oh, I do. In my dining room, I start plants. We seeded some things. My friend Nikki, who helps me, and she's just wonderful. She's a really good soul. We seeded some things last Friday, and they're already up. Mainly the herbs that take a long time, rosemary, lavender, thyme. They're all slow growers, and perennials that also take time. You have to start very early if you expect them to bloom in this same year.
Right, right.
And I'll be starting more, but only once I get the main greenhouse fired up across the street. Because it needs a lot more room than I have in my dining room. This is little Snuggles. She's very curious. But
I brought this aloe plant today for you because I think it's a good plant for anybody that wants to start out to see if they can keep it alive.
Yeah. And non-toxic to your pets.
That's good. Well, also you take the old leaves when you have burns and as a first aid measure.
Well, and native people used it as a wonderful nutritional supplement.
They did.
There's a lot of vitamins and minerals in there, like there are in so many other plants.
Right.
But in the modern world, we have limited our consumption to about 9 different species. That's starting to be broadened out, and it needs to be, because what if some disease comes along that we can't combat easily that affects a major food crop? What is that going to do to our food supply chain? So we need to diversify more, and it's finally happening, and that's kind of what we're talking about today. Diversification of things and embracing old ways, which are still perfectly viable, even though they were forgotten over time.
Right. You're right. The question is, are we making those changes fast enough for what is going on here in Vermont?
You know my opinion on that already.
Well,
and it's getting better, but it's baby steps, and we need leaps instead of baby steps. And I don't know how to accomplish that myself. I'm not a politician. Not sure I would be a good politician because I don't hold my tongue sometimes.
But you're certainly a teacher.
I always have been.
Right.
And my view is that I can share every bit of knowledge I have, and I still have it when I'm done. And I equate it to love. You can share all the love you have in your heart with friends and relatives. It's still there when you're done sharing it. And that's my whole philosophy.
I think it's like the sum is greater than the parts.
Exactly.
You and I talking about plants and recognizing that it's a worthwhile endeavor, especially if you can multitask or use multi-use of what you are growing. For example, lavender.
Oh, yes.
Lavender's hard to grow here.
If you have the right varieties, it's not so much. I get a lot of my herb and perennial seeds from a company out of Germany, Gelito. And they're great people. They have a lot of varieties that you just can't find. Come on, little girl. That you just can't find in the United States. And their stuff just works because it's top quality. And I pay a little more for it.
And it's organic.
It works. Most of their stuff is organic. Not all of their perennial seed is organic. But all of their herb and any edible flower seeds are organic.
So what is organic these days? You know, a lot of our farmers are using old-time practices.
Because they worked.
Because they work and because the alternative seems to be using chemicals and all sorts of artificially made products that delete the goodness of the soil.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're running into, not just locally, nationwide and globally. After World War I, which the chemical companies made a lot of money creating weapons of war, unfortunately, when there was no more war, they had to do something to keep their bottom lines going. So they went out into the world and convinced farmers who had used traditional methods that they could be more productive using chemical methods. But that doesn't replenish or feed the soil. Yes, it feeds the plants, but the minute you stop applying those chemical nutrients, you've already, my children, you've already depleted the soil, and it's completely denuded of nutrients, and that's so sad.
And if it blows away, it blows away.
That is changing. I will say, the land is leased also for corn, and I will say that Todd Gremowitz and his son, I believe his name is Jeff, have recently made some production changes, and they no longer plow.
Oh.
They're using no-till. Yes, they break up the surface of the soil, but their crops are just as productive as ever, and that was an old method, and it's coming back.
Well, that's permaculture.
It in a way, permaculture doesn't require you to plant crops every year. They're more perennial crops, fruit trees, berry bushes, stuff like that. Even something like horseradish or rhubarb, stuff that's permanent that comes back on its own, and yet you can harvest it. It benefits birds and insects. We're not alone on this planet, and sometimes we act like we are.
Well, when you talk about extinction and what is going on with this climate crisis, and I say it is a climate crisis because of what we're doing to our water, and it means that we're going to have less and less wildlife around. And so the whole purpose of this is to shine a light on the fact that we need to change our ways.
We do.
We need to change our
ways. And
ways.
it's starting, but it's baby steps, and unfortunately, from what I see from my perspective, is we really need to start accelerating because nature isn't going to wait for us.
Okay.
Nature doesn't work on our timeline or our time scale. Nature does what it does. And I won't assign gender to nature. I know they call it Mother Nature, but nature just is. And the more we try and combat nature and hem nature in, it tends to have a reverse effect that comes back to us. Not immediately. But if you try and contain rivers, which in the past have never been contained, and they flooded because they had to at certain times of year, we need to learn to live with that.
Right.
It's not going to change. And what you were saying about biodiversity and insects, birds, every time you cut another thread in the web of life, it makes that web less and less resilient.
Because it's part of us.
It is part of us, and we are part of it.
System.
Exactly, but our arrogance tells us we're above all that.
Okay, so for those listening to us today, thank you very much. What can we do? Step one.
Yep.
Your opinion. My opinion is we need to listen to what's going on outside. We've lost that.
We do, and I understand people are time constrained. I'm lucky that in my life I can do a lot of deep dives and research because at certain times of the year I have a lot of time on my hands. But we need to learn to fall in love again with the natural world and everything that means, and learn that we have to share this place, which the more research and investigation we do out into the universe, we find out every day how rare and special this planet is. It doesn't matter how it became this way, whether it was naturally or through some divine intervention, we should be caring for it and taking care of it, and we're not. Which leads us to your rain gardens, trying to prevent runoff, because our society produces a lot of unnatural toxins. It's just the way it is, and you have to go back forever to try and figure out how we got here, but this is where we're at.
Absolutely.
And runoff brings a lot of toxins into our water systems, and they don't typically go away.
Right. So now it's up to us to pay attention to what's going outside.
Yep.
And that's the whole idea of on the porch. Because if you're able to get outside every day, and I think there's some people that are not only get outside, but to use your senses,
Exactly.
use your hearing and look. It's absolutely magnificent. And I understand that if you can get your hands in dirt, that's like Prozac.
It's healthy.
That's like Prozac.
It is. They've done study after study, and it is our disconnect from the natural world that causes a lot of both medical and psychological issues, because we are creatures of nature, and we've divorced ourselves in a lot of ways from it, and that's unfortunate. And I'm not saying that we should all be living in huts with loincloths. I think we can find a balance.
Absolutely. And the balance is different for everybody, but at least it is being aware. It's an altered view from what we have been fed for quite a long
And
time.
mindfulness.
Mindfulness is a good way to talk about it. I absolutely agree. And what better place to start than in here, in
It
our own
starts
hometown.
at home.
Right.
Everything does.
Right. So get outside every day, get yourself a plant to start caring for, and start paying attention.
Plant babies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And share with your, I think the whole secret of this is coming together as community. That
Exactly.
we've lost that. We've lost that.
That, unfortunately, is a symptom of our times, and the internet and information technology has really brought some good things, but it's also brought with it some not so good things. And again, that requires balance. It requires balance, and it requires thought and thinking, but a lot of people are so stressed, working 2 jobs, 3 jobs sometimes, they don't have time to research. And which is why I try and educate people. Anybody who will listen to me.
Yeah, it's where we are getting our information from these days. You have to pay attention to that.
All information is not equal.
That's correct. That's correct. And the information is being less available, which is why we're doing this PEG TV show.
Yeah.
So you want to talk to your friends. And what I see as a really positive thing come spring is we have that, what is it called? Front Porch Forum.
Yep.
You belong to that. And you're able to put out there what you have to share.
Exactly.
Is what it comes down to. And it's my view that it's a universal law that the more you share, it will come back to you.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Whether it's knowledge or whatever resources, that capitalism seems to be based on go in there, suck out everything you can, and be damned with.
But we're seeing the results of that, and it sometimes takes decades or centuries before you see the negative results, and we're seeing it now. And we tell ourselves we are so smart and so intelligent, But then I look at our actions as a civilization, and so there are days I honestly question that. And I include myself in that. You know, for a long time I was a slow learner and didn't respond to some of the problems that were happening in our society because I was busy and focused on me and my own little fiefdom. And we need to have a broader view.
Sometimes that's survival, though. And
It
I think
is.
there's an awful lot of people here. I think what you're talking about is wonderful job opportunity that is worthwhile and beneficial to your health as
Oh,
far
yeah.
as working in the fields. Now, we know that we're losing our old farmers, and they're not young, and they always need help on the farm to learn how to take care of those plants to serve other people by feeding us.
And there's a lot of knowledge, I forget what they call it in management, tribal knowledge. When you have somebody who's a senior member of a business, if they haven't trained somebody with their information, that information goes. And it dies with those people. And that has been happening for centuries now. And there's a lot of old ways that actually weren't that hard and were more beneficial.
That's correct. That's great. Like, well, let's talk about it the indigenous ways. Take care of your earth. Take care of your land. Take care of your elders.
Yes. And it's not hippy dippy. It's not. It's just the right thing to do in a society.
Use only what you need. You don't have to pull all the onions. What are the green onions called that are coming
scallions?
out? No, the woodland onions.
Oh, ramps.
Ramps.
Yes,
You
the
don't
wild garlic. Yeah.
You don't have to take all the ramps or all the mushrooms. You can leave them for the woodland friends.
We
that
haven't
eat
quite
them
figured
too.
that out yet.
Well,
We're starting to.
if we don't, they're not going to be there because there is a science to how you can harvest.
Exactly.
There is a science.
And it's the same with domestic crops. People don't realize even something like French tarragon or asparagus, you can't go out and clear cut it its first year because it'll end up killing the plant because it needs the sun and nutrients to become healthy enough and robust enough to continue for decades. If asparagus will last centuries if you take care of the asparagus.
Is there asparagus around here? Do they plant it?
This is not the right kind of soil. This is too sandy and well drained. Asparagus needs more of a heavy, moist clay soil
Is that right?
to thrive. I read too much.
Well, I have asparagus growing in our yard, and we get asparagus in the springtime. and
You've
we
got a
eat it.
good clay loam.
Well, it's mostly compost that we've put in there because it's better than having to buy it to make it yourself.
It is.
Listen, thank you so much. This was really very enjoyable talking to
You're
you. I think we're
welcome.
going to have to do that again seasonal.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate your support of my small local business as well.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you have done much to help me last year and again this year so
Well,
far.
thank you.
And that is
Thank you. Like I said,
something I'm
I'm a
grateful
true
for.
believer in your products because I've been buying lots of products for lots of years, and I could not believe how well your plants did.
whatever I'm doing works, and I try not to let ego get into my business. And I don't worry about what my competition is doing. I worry about me, and every year I try and be better and do better. It's not always profitable, but I'm a capitalist because I have to be if I want to stay in business. But I keep my prices reasonable, and I often offer a new
Yeah.
variety or something. Here, try this, get back to me.
Absolutely. They all have a story. Your plants have a story.
They do, they're my babies.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you,
So this
Kathleen.
is on the porch, not on the porch, on the old Billings farm, and this is Rutland Town, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, Rutland Town, not the Rutland City.
The other Rutland town, I call it.
Is that
Not
right? Is that right? Thank you for listening. This is the fourth series, part. Let's put it that way, and we'll be back. Thank you to our supporters, and get in touch, and we will see you soon from On the Porch.
And love your plants.
Rutland, Vermont. Love your plants. Absolutely. Thank you.